ADHD behaviors often get mislabeled because they look like attitude problems when they're really just struggling with attention, impulse control, emotional regulation, and executive function. Hi, and welcome back to the Ask Mom Parenting Podcast because parenting is everything. I'm Sue, and with me is Randy, and this is your no bullshit, no filter, zero guilt parenting reboot. Whether you're knee deep in the toddler tantrums, navigating tween teen drama, or somewhere in between, you'll get at least one actionable tool today, one episode at a time. Today's episode is Parenting Children with ADHD, how to know when to connect and when to correct. Today we're talking about one of the most requested topics in my parenting workshops, and that's how to handle tricky behaviors associated with ADHD and other diagnosed disorders. As a bit of a disclaimer, I'm a parenting coach. I'm not a therapist, and that means I don't diagnose conditions or provide clinical treatments. Therapy is designed to help process the past and heal wounds, and therapists have a very specific set of tools and evidence-based interventions for children diagnosed with conditions like ADHD. My work is different, and coaching tends to look more forward. I'll help parents take a diagnosis, if there is one, and translate that into day-to-day strategies, how to set up routines, communicate expectations, restructure communication, all to be able to respond in that moment. When a child has ADHD or any other diagnosis, the therapist will handle the clinical side, while I help guide the parent on how to parent that child, turning the therapist's recommendations into real life, workable habits at home. Overall, I like to just stay squarely in my lane of empowering parents for the road ahead. What we're talking about today are strategies so that you can determine the difference between when your child's behavior needs emotional support to process those emotions or when they need clear direction and structure to be held accountable. So, when to connect and when to correct, and how to figure out what your child needs from you in that moment. Real quick, picture this. You're leaving a friend's house or an activity, and it's time to leave the play date, and your child suddenly refuses. They're shouting and hiding behind the couch, or they're throwing their shoes because they don't want to go. Other parents are watching, and you can just feel your face getting hot. Is this just defiance or a classic ADHD moment where their brain wasn't ready for the transition? Stopping one activity and switching to another could feel like slamming on the emotional brakes at full speed in an ADHD child. What looks like disrespect could actually be dysregulation, where their nervous system might be saying, I can't stop yet. Or it could just be your child testing the line to see if you meant what you said. Now you're standing there embarrassed and you're wondering, do I drag them out to prove that I mean business? Or do I crouch down and help them through the storm, knowing that it might take another 10 minutes of every ounce of patience that I have left? How do I know what strategy to use in that moment? This example is repeatable, whether it's homework with tears welling or pencils flying and statements like, it's too hard, I'm stupid, I hate this teacher, or bedtime meltdowns. Pick your moment and we all can relate.
I just wanted to point out one thing that I think most parents can relate to is what you said about reminding yourself that it's not necessarily defiance, it's about emotional regulation a lot of the time, in that their brains simply might not be ready for the transition. As a parent, that's like a huge aha moment for me. I have two kids. I do have one child that I'm like, does he have ADHD or not? My son's a little more on the hyper side, a little more energetic. I've taken the sort of position to just kind of wait to see if anyone at school says anything. I have a sister-in-law that's a school psychologist. She, in her interactions with him, doesn't see necessarily anything. He's around a ton of educators who I know have had discussions with family members when they do think there's an issue. Even just having a high energy kid, I can definitely see where some of this already is going to apply. It's really going to even help me with my high energy son. I definitely think there's a lot here already that parents today can just take away from. I'm definitely excited to hear more about this.
Well, we have talked about how boys are more tactile and high energy because the dichotomy between boys and girls are so different when they're young. Girls are so quiet, they sit still. Boys are they just are built different. And a lot of times, just normal, healthy, happy behavior can seem like ADHD behavior. I know that with my kids, even just 15 years ago, I had one kid that was a little bit more high energy, a little bit more antsy. We just ended up giving him a little stress ball at school to kind of redirect. There's a lot of confusion around boys and their high energy and what's regular normal behavior and what could be stimulated by some other reason. Parents struggle for a variety of reasons with trying to determine what the behavior is. They're struggling with what to do and how to handle it. No one ever shows us how to parent a brain that processes differently. But there's some reasons that come into play. Let's just go over a few, try to calibrate where you might be falling in your own life. It wasn't modeled for us. I think it's all pretty universal that we grew up with parents that said, because I said so, or my way or the highway, or don't talk back. That approach doesn't work with ADHD kids. Actually, it doesn't work with any kid. I know it didn't work for me. Especially ADHD brains, they don't respond to command and control type of parenting. They need collaboration, they need leadership upfront, leadership first expectations that are made clear upfront. The do as I say mentality is what got me yelling. I know it doesn't work because it didn't work for me with my mom and it didn't work for me when I had my first kid. But it took me a while to realize that kids are capable of understanding and cooperating with us when my communication is structured to actually land instead of be a lecture. Another reason why parents might struggle with determining, whether this is ADHD or neurotypical behavior or what to do about it is that they fear they might be too strict, especially with ADHD brains that are still trying to process. Parents worry that being firm will push their kids away, that their child will resent them or shut down. The truth is, strictness without collaboration first won't build discipline. It builds rebellion. Instead of learning to think for themselves, kids will learn how to just outsmart the rules if we don't involve them first. We can also, on the flip side, be afraid of being too lenient. There's the opposite problem where parents don't want to be pushovers. They're afraid if they show too much empathy, they'll be taken advantage of and their kids will walk all over them. The problem is leniency without leadership teaches kids that limits are optional and your words won't carry much weight. Overall, as parents today, I'm seeing in my workshops and with the parents that I work with in my practice that we're all missing the right tools. We've never really been taught exactly how to structure our communication that we can parent more calmly, hold the boundaries, or decode what is really behind the behavior. Without these tools, every meltdown feels like a test that we're failing, when it's really just a skill gap that's waiting to be learned. Let's kind of zoom out and simplify this a little bit. Let's boil it down to a simple statement. And that statement is behavior is just another form of communication. Every behavior, even the ones that drive us crazy, is a form of communication from our kids. Especially with ADHD kids, behavior can be their language when words fall short. What looks like defiance might really be a kid saying, I'm overwhelmed. He doesn't have the words yet. What looks like laziness might actually be, I don't know where to start. So I'm not going to start because I don't know where to start. It's all too overwhelming. And what looks like disrespect might be, my brain is moving faster than my mouth, which is actually my problem after I've had too much coffee. ADHD behaviors often get mislabeled because they look like attitude problems when underneath, they're really just struggling with attention, impulse control, emotional regulation, and executive function. Things like planning, organizing, shifting between tasks, or controlling emotions. Those are all very difficult for ADHD kids to master. The challenge is when parents don't see the why behind the behavior communication, it's easy to assume the child is being willful. So we tighten the reins, we raise our voices, or we double down on discipline. But that often backfires because instead of learning, kids feel misunderstood. Parents feel stuck between being too strict or too soft. And that cycle leads straight to frustration, burnout, and constant conflict in the home. When to connect and when to correct. For parents with kids with ADHD or a history of early trauma, including those that might be adopted from foster backgrounds. One of the hardest decisions they face is, when do I correct the behavior or when do I connect? Getting a misbehavior or disobedience from the child, I don't know whether to connect with this child or hold the line and keep the boundary. Let's start with a useful mindset shift. Before jumping in to fix or correct any behavior, our job is first to observe. When you can pause long enough to read the situation and for what's really happening, what's driving the behavior, you stop reacting to the noise and start responding to the need. Once you can see what the behavior is trying to say, you'll know whether you should simply tune in and let that moment have space, or whether you should teach a new skill. Being an informed observer suddenly gives your parenting a lot more effectiveness. Remember again that our child's behavior is telling us something, but without words. And not all misbehavior means disobedience. Your child isn't trying to make your life harder. They're trying to tell you something they may not have the words for yet. First, ask yourself, what's driving this? And we'll get to all the specific ways that you can determine that in a minute.
I love what you're saying about changing the mindset and the mindset shift. I work a lot on my own mindset and changing this mindset to that all behavior is communication is so valuable. Also, moving away from the mindset that all misbehavior is disobedience can be a complete game changer. I'm in the middle of learning this myself. It's something I forget, but I'm always needing to remind myself. And I'm trying to become consciously aware of that more. And it is a practice, but if you know it and can remember it and try to remind yourself of that, it really is helpful. I think at the end of the day, kids just want to please adults and they really want to please their parents and their teachers. They really do. I think taking on this mindset shift really like depersonalizes it for parents. I know for me, it's so easy to take things personally and assume that things are being done to us as parents instead of just really simply realizing that it really is all about communication.
Love that depersonalization word, because getting back to my original, the mindset shift, the key mindset shift that I work with parents is to stop, pause, but observe. And when we observe, and then we know that we have the tools to react in which, however we decide that we've observed the behavior to be the root cause, like the root reason for this behavior, we now, and throughout the rest of this podcast, you'll have the skills and the tools that you'll need to be able to go, I'm observing, I see where this behavior is coming from. Now I'm going to be able to boil this down to really simple, basic responses and determine what I have going on before me. But getting back to what you said earlier about the depersonalization of it, I remember when I was yelling all the time and I had to go back and I studied behavioral psychology and I really got back into books early on. One of the biggest takeaways, well, for me anyway, because I kind of looked at these kids like, he knows what he's doing. It was personal. One of the biggest takeaways, what a sentence that really turned the corner for me was, a misbehaving child is a discouraged child. And that was so eye opening for me because, again, that takes the personalization out of it. But when I saw my son misbehaving or looking for attention because he had triplet siblings that took away he was just 4 or 5, he's trying to figure out his place. I reframed it. A misbehaving child is a discouraged child. And instead of getting mad, I was like, took a second and I was like, he needs a hug. That turned into me spending a little bit more one-on-one time with him because his behavior was communicating something to me that he didn't have the words for and he did not have the wisdom yet for. That's why I think it's so important to teach parents that even with ADHD or any disorder, it doesn't matter the prior trauma, it's the adopted children, the foster care children, we're dealing with sometimes heightened behaviors. But as a parent, we have to be teachers and to be able to take the moment and say, I'm observing, and now arming these parents with skills to be able to go, okay, now I know how to respond, but first I have to observe, is so powerful. Let's help you understand ADHD kids. We have to first lay some groundwork as to what are some of the basic differences between a neurotypical child and their responses and behavior and an ADHD or trauma impacted behavior. I think it's kind of important to set the tone for level that playing field for a second. Let's get into like neurotypical children. They usually act out because they're testing boundaries and they're craving attention or they're pushing for independence. Their behavior kind of has a little bit of a logic behind it, even if it's inconvenience. When you correct with calm, consistent structure with a neurotypical child, they learn from it and they tend to adjust fairly quickly. On the other hand, with ADHD or trauma impacted kids, often they know what they're supposed to do, but they just can't get there quickly in the moment. Their nervous system hijacks their reasoning and they're flooded with an impulse or a fight or flight type of behavior or thought process. And correction in those moments just will not register. It just adds fuel in that moment. Keeping these basic differences in mind, here are some ideas of when to connect. Connecting means my child is showing signs of dysregulation. Their emotions are bigger than their ability to think in that moment. And this looks like meltdowns that go beyond age or logic. If your child is crying, yelling, panicking, shutting down, then they're just offline. No logic or consequence will ever land while the brain is on fire. For ADHD or trauma based behaviors, connection means helping them feel safe, seen, and soothed before you teach or correct. You'll never be able to teach a new skill to a child who is this loop. We might use my lead first method by laying out expectations ahead of time. My favorite skills for teaching parents for almost any behavior that parenting in advance or that lead first mentality. Use my lead first method by laying out expectations ahead of time. Part of feeling safe for any child is knowing what's coming and what's expected of them. Predictability is a regulation tool. In my earlier example of when we have to leave the party or we have to leave the event and the child is melting down and we don't know how to behave in that moment, we don't know whether we should get down on his level and take 10 more minutes or whether we should hold the line and be accountable. What we can do with any child, whether it's ADHD behavior or neurotypical behavior, always planning in advance, always setting expectations. When I come back in, when you see me come in after the party is ended, that's going to be your sign that we're leaving, knowing what to expect. Predictability, like I said, is a regulation tool. And those are all things we can do before we even drop the child off at the party. You can validate their feelings. You say, I can see that you're really frustrated, which is signaling a sympathy and an empathy and a safety vibe from you. You can offer sensory grounding or transition time. So a hug, a walk, or a quiet space to just react. But they need to reset on their own. They can go have a quiet space. But again, mentioning that up front or saying, here's some of the tools we're going to use when you find yourself in that loop. Here's how we're going to redirect you so that they know what to expect. This is not letting kids and their behavior off the hook. It's getting them back online so that learning can happen. We aren't allowing misbehavior. We're simply delaying the correction until their brain is capable of self-control. We have to decide through observation, is this child offline? Are they really reacting in a more aggressive way? Then we need to connect and we need to take space and we need to have those tools laid out up front with the child so they know what to expect. Now, when to correct? You correct when your child appears regulated enough to listen and learn. Once their nervous system is calm, you step in as the leader again. That's when you hold the boundaries, teach accountability, and follow through on limits. For neurotypical kids, that might happen quickly. They can calm down, they can process and respond with remorse or reflection. But for ADHD kids, you may need to kind of come back later, circle back after a snack or after some movement, after they've had a moment to reset. The key is to teach when the brain is open, not when it's locked down.
I love that. Teach when the brain is open, not locked down. When I hear that, it definitely resets how I think about everything. I think it's easy to personalize things as parents or feel frustrated in the moment, but really realizing that the brain is not open. And as you mentioned, no matter what we're trying to convey, no rational thought is going to get through. I've noticed having to do this with my own kids, especially huge meltdowns or tantrums. Like you said, they're offline. I think that is just a great way to sum it up. The connection part you talked about too, I think is really huge. Just noticing with my own kids trying to take more time to connect and really validate their feelings. But it can really help and really change the outcome of a situation to one that's like severe frustration and meltdowns to something more calm. One question I have for you is you're mentioning when to correct, when to connect, and not doing it when the brain is offline, waiting till the brain is open, which I think is amazing. But as parents, I think it can be tough to know. How can we know when our children are ready for correction?
Great question. When do we know when to toe the line, when to hold the boundary, when to correct, and how to know when they're ready? You correct when your child's body and brain slows down and they're showing signs of being back online. And the ways to tell that would be that their breathing has slowed, their tone of voice might soften, eye contact and basic communication returns. They can follow a short, simple direction like, come sit with me or let's get some water. Those are the green lights that regulation has returned and teaching can actually stick. If your child's meltdown drags on for 30 to 60 minutes, they're not being manipulative. They're just flooded in that moment. Their nervous system is running the show. That's when you can shift from stop the behavior to help the body settle. When you're observing, you're looking for if they're continuing offline for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that's a sign that dysregulation has kicked in. You need to have some intervention on helping their body settle. Here's what to do when it feels like it's just never ending. Keep your own body calm. Your tone, your breathing, and your posture are the biggest cues to their nervous system that you are not going to be upset and that you're going to take some moments to let them get back online. Say less. Use short, steady phrases like you're safe, I'm right here, we'll figure this out together. Talking too much just adds fuel to the moment. You can create a sensory space, reduce noise, lights, and stimulation. Often, a drink, a snack, or physical grounding, like a weighted blanket or a hand on the shoulder or rocking, can be effective. And co regulate first, correct later. Once the wave passes, circle back with structure. Let's talk about what happened and what needs to happen next time. There's always a moment to teach. I think that sometimes in my workshops, there's confusion with parents. They think that it's one or the other. It's letting them off the hook, or it's just always drilling down and having to be accountable. There is space for both. That's why being the observer is the most important thing. We are teachers, we are trainers, and parenting needs training for each child so that because we're ideally our kids are adults in training. In this particular case, discerning the behaviors helps us decide and pick. Here's the observation point, and then from there, we've got A or B. We're just really simplifying this. For neurotypical kids, that reset might only take a few minutes, but for ADHD trauma affected children, it might take much longer and often requires movement like walking, jumping, stretching, hydration, or nutrition before their brain can even try to learn. A good rule of thumb is that if they can think, talk, and take direction, you can teach. If they're crying, yelling, or frozen, you connect and regulate first. Here's a key mindset shift. You're not giving in by waiting. You're waiting for access to the part of the brain that learns. Once it's back online, that's when you calmly reinforce the boundary, revisit expectations, and teach the skill. It's not one or the other. We're not letting behavior go. We're letting it pass. We're holding the boundary and teaching a skill.
Your ideas for what to do when meltdowns feel never ending, I think is so important for busy parents today. I know that I have listen, heard some things today that I'm even going to try to implement as well, because I feel like what you just said really helps give parents tools on how to help their kids, but also feel in control of a situation that can feel really out of control. Like we can always control ourselves. And parents, we're all really busy, but it's really important just to, I think, sit back, remind ourselves that we can take that 15 or 20 minutes or so out of our day to do these things. And it'll strengthen our relationship with our kids and is really going to help improve the situation. And as you mentioned earlier, really build long lasting skills. I love that you're giving tips for what to do when the meltdown feels never ending, because I know as a parent, it always feels never ending. I think that's amazing.
Here are the practical checkpoints for parents. I'm really trying to boil this down so that you have something to really sink your teeth into when that stressful moment is upon you. When you're unsure which behavior to do, which reaction that your child needs, start by asking yourself, is my child right now in a place to learn or to just feel safe? What's the behavior telling me as I observe it? Are they giving me the eye contact? Are they ready for that accountability moment? Are they ready for that correction? Or do they just need to feel safe to where we just take a moment, let them regulate, and then we come back to the accountability piece? If they're calm and aware, that's when you correct. If they're spiraling or defensive, you connect first. Remember, connection does not replace correction. It preps the ground for it. We're still going to be teaching lessons. We're just going to get there a little bit more slowly with dysregulated trauma or ADHD children. We're still going to get there because we have to teach these kids these skills for their own life, for them to be able to learn how to calm themselves down as a skill set for life. This matters because many parents burn out because they're stuck in correction mode 24/7. They're constantly tightening the reins, but the behavior doesn't change because the child's brain is still not in receive mode yet. Let me give a couple other little quick examples. In a neurotypical child, say your 10-year-old rolls his eyes when you ask him to unload the dishwasher. You calmly remind them of the expectation and follow through with a consequence if needed. For an ADHD child, 10-year-old bursts into tears, yells, storms off when asked to unload the dishwasher. You pause, you give them space, reconnect once they're calm, and then you talk about follow through and respect. They have control after the fact. They can start to regulate themselves and start to learn how to behave. They don't get a free pass on this behavior. They get a moment to reset, but then we circle back and we parent. I would like to give you guys some references for listeners that want to go deeper. These are really great to think about, very helpful for parents. There's a book from Dr. Ross Green called The Explosive Child, and it's excellent on understanding the lagging skills and how to respond to challenging behaviors with collaboration instead of punishment, which is what I always talk about. Kids are capable of collaborating with us and being brought into the process. That works with my lead first and my parent upfront methodology, which is they know what to expect, and that gives them safety. There's another really great book called Brain Body Parenting by Dr. Mona Delahooke. It offers a brilliant breakdown on how regulation drives behavior and why connection must come before correction. In my practice, I've seen a remarkable result that I don't get money from these people or whatever, but I've had about probably a handful of clients tell me that they had tremendous success with a program called Brain Balance. They're a franchise, so they are a national company. Brain Balance focuses on how to rewrite the brain and how the brain communicates. It's not a therapy and a medication. They don't work with medication. It's a structured program that blends movement, learning, and nutrition to help kids regulate better and think more clearly. For some families, it's been a helpful bridge between understanding why their child struggles and how to strengthen the brain systems behind it. It's available nationally. One of my clients told me about how her daughter has just completely turned around. She's now focusing, she's managing tasks better and commands. One of the little tiny takeaway tips that they both learned was that when she asks her daughter to do 3 chores, the daughter will not remember. She cannot process it. But when she writes it down on a sticky note, they all get done without a problem. The thing that I like about it is that it's medication free. It gives kids the skill sets for them to manage their own behavior in the future. It's not just us parenting, but again, I really don't like foregoing any of the accountability pieces in our parenting. We still need to be able to do that. We still need to be able to be parents, but we also have to give that empathy to kids that might need a little bit more time to process. When wrapping up, this isn't about fixing your child. It's about helping them channel the best of who they already are. Well, think about Michael Phelps. He was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, and he could not sit still or focus in class. His mom introduced structure and swimming to him as an outlet, and he turned that restlessness into a relentless drive, eventually becoming the most decorated Olympian swimmer in history. It's not connect or correct. It's connect, then correct with ADHD kids. Every single child, whether they have ADHD or trauma affected or are even neurotypical, they all need to be parented, taught, guided, and held accountable. We don't lower the bar for kids who struggle. We just adjust the approach so they can reach it. Our goal as parents is the same for every child, to develop the self control, resilience, and confidence that turn challenges into strength. All kids need both connection and correction. The difference with ADHD or trauma affected kids is just the timing. Their brains take longer to come back online, so we don't skip the accountability piece. We just wait until it can land. That's what connection and correction together do. One builds safety, the other builds skills. And when both are in play, you can raise a child who can handle life, not just react to it. Thank you so much for listening today. And if you need any specialized help or tailored help, I'm available. We do workshops. I'm available for one-on-one coaching. My book, Secrets to Parenting Without Giving a Fuck, is on Amazon. I also have a private Facebook group called Yell Free Parenting for Exhausted Moms. Feel free to connect with me. Follow me on Instagram at Ask Mom Parenting. I'm here for you guys, and I would love to help. Thanks, and happy parenting.